Hi, my name is Eileen Russell, and you probably are used to these by now. This is a short video on Monica Coleman's Introduction to Process Theology, just to give you a sense of what's going on in process theology and give you a better sense of Coleman's perspective on it as well. This is from the book that she and I and Nancy Hall wrote and edited, called Creating Women's Theology. It's an introduction to women's process theology, written by Coleman, Howell, and Russell. In it, Coleman writes a section or a chapter called The Introduction to Process Theology. She understands process thought as a way of making sense of the world of experience that is filled with relationships and sensations and feelings in a reasoned, intelligently consistent and helpful system of understanding. We begin with the focus on relationality and experience. God is relational with each and all actuality, and we are made up of our relationships with each other, with people we don't know, with our own past, and especially our relationships with God, our relationship with God. The future is open. And one way of understanding this open future is using the metaphor of improvisation. Like jazz, it is free and indeterminate. Life is a jazz improvisation. God is the leader that offers suggestions, but we are free. By necessity, we are free. And we decide how to respond to the past, our own past, the past of others, and to our current situation. And we bring that all together, and we hear God's lure, and we are enabled to bring everything together with God's lure, the possibilities of the future. We are in the process. Another important claim about process theology is that we are in the process of becoming. Each and every entity in the world, including humans as well as birds, are in the process of becoming. We are not static beings. So this process of becoming in every moment of time happens through our relationships with others, through our own past, our relationship with our own past, God's possibilities offered to us, and God's lure, our decision to follow God's lure toward this new possibility, this new way of bringing together our past into a future, a new future. Creativity is an important element in process theology and an important understanding of how the world moves forward. And this creativity is also about novelty. It is a value that the divine lure continues to pull us toward greater differentiation, possibility, transformation. And it is the process of our deciding how we want to bring the past in along with God's lure, God's possibility, into the moment that we are becoming, into this decision that we are making toward becoming in the next moment. One of the other elements of process theology is that while God is definitely the creator and has a lot more power and creativity and wisdom than any of us, we are also co-creators in this process of making the new world, making the world anew in each moment. This is a creative advance. That's the overarching value of life. That life is moving toward a creative advance, constantly being recreated and being recreated by our decisions and by God's lure for us and by the decisions of all those around us. Each and every moment we are becoming and recreating new possibilities and actualizing those new possibilities. God lures us into a deeper, more intense, harmonious, creative, and life-giving decisions. Those are the values in process theology. God's creativity is a source of novelty, and our creativity incarnates that novelty. The advancing and progressing toward greater inclusivity, greater beauty, and greater beauty is understood as conflict that is being transformed into contrast. I encourage you to reflect upon that as a definition or understanding of beauty. Conflict being transformed into contrast. This is God's creative transformation of the world and every entity at every moment, all adding to the whole. Intensity is valued. The famous quote, that process that Whitehead talks about, is that the one become many and are increased by the many become one and are increased by one. So the many, the multiplicity of the moment are integrated into the one in every moment and then are increased by the next and each other. The emphasis again here is on becoming, not be static being. Each and every entity is always constantly in the process of becoming. We are becoming who we are becoming. We are becoming how God envisions us to be as we participate with God, following God's lure, bringing in all of our past and the relationships we have with other entities and integrating into the next new moment that is a creative becoming. Scripture is calling us toward that which is holy. Scripture is contextual and communal, and our interpretations and enactments based on Scripture are in the process of becoming. We're constantly re-evaluating, reinterpreting, re-understanding. What does this scriptural passage mean? And I don't know what your experience is, but every time you reread a passage that you've loved, perhaps and heard a story from the Gospels, perhaps you see something slightly different. You see it in a different vein or a different perspective or a different light. We are enacting, we are becoming, we are in the process of becoming, relating with each other, our past and God, toward a future that is complex, intense, beautiful, creative, and advancing toward greater harmony. Now, process theology understands God as having two natures. We talked a little bit about this before. There's the primordial nature of God, which I have symbolized by this. And it is the unchanging love and creativity, the value of goodness, beauty, novel possibilities, the inclusive nature of God that is constantly giving to creation, constantly giving, suggesting, offering to creation. And then there's the consequent nature. And this is the aspect of God that receives from creation and is affected by creation's decisions, our sinful failing, as well as our loving and life-giving, and reevaluates these aspects of God are reintegrated in every moment so that God can then reevaluate the suggestions that God is giving to us, the lures that God is highlighting of what's a good possibility here, what's the best possibility to choose to actualize that will bring the greatest love and harmony and creativity to all. Process theology is also related to feminism in a unique way. And this is a way of talking about the connectedness and the similarity of process theology and feminism, but also how feminist process theologians, such as Monica Coleman and Marjorie Suhaki, see process theology in unique ways, they are highlighting these elements. They highlight experience as much more important and fundamental than systems. And this is common in process theology. The particularity reflects reality better than universalism, that we are all particulars. We are not a universal, common, all the same. All women are not the same. All birds are not the same. Particularity is important, and it reflects reality and God's reality more effectively than making universal claims. Praxis is more important than abstractions. Praxis meaning not simply practice, but an informed practice that is a relational or integrating dynamic of understanding and acting and rethinking and understanding and reformulating a movement, a plan of action, acting, reevaluating, so on and so forth. Organicism is more important than dualism, that an entity is a wholeness of an organ, and that the universe is one big organism. It's not separate entities, that we often assume it that way, that what happens in one part of the world does not affect another part of the world. I think we can see that this is more and more becoming apparent. Dualism doesn't really work. So dualism is an ancient, and it has served its purpose. And we've talked a little bit about that before, but it is not as helpful in understanding our reality, particularly when we are focusing our reality on an experiential experience of reality and what is the way we understand it and the way we know it to be in our bones. Nature is also valuable. It's not just about persons. God is not only concerned about persons, but is also concerned about nature and our environment and each individual aspect of the environment, each bird, each tree, God, each flower, each elephant. God is concerned about that, and it is an important part of reality. We are not the only thing that's important, or are we even the pentacle, perhaps? So many people have assumed that we are God's favorite species. Perhaps God likes elephants. Or if God is like me, God likes sun conures best. Yes. Another important element of process theology, or tenet of process theology, is there's an openness to dialogue. And this openness to dialogue is about with science and with other understandings of science in general, various scientific ways of understanding how people are who we are, how nature is who it is. This dialogue with science is an important source of theology. So we're not left to simply understand the nature of bees, or the nature of history, or the nature of human selfness, or the nature of anything, only based on what the Bible has to say. We also include, what does science have to tell us about how people interact? What does science have to tell us about the nature of the desert in Jesus's time, and what's going on in the historical context? What does science have to tell us about creativity and how people relate with each other? And what does science have to tell us about violence? How do we get to be violent? How did humans get to be violent? Is there a way to overcome that violence? Is all violence bad? Well, what does science have to tell us about that? Psychology, biology, neurology, all of the different ways in which humans can understand the reality in which we live are God-given. God is a part of all of those. Even those elements and aspects that try to claim there is no God, God is still a part of them. And lastly, there's an engagement and desire to engage with other religious perspectives as dialogue partners, that we can learn from each other and we can learn about ourselves and about others. And we learn about God also from engaging with persons who have understood God and experienced God in different contexts at different times. And we learn more about ourselves, them, of course, and we learn about God too. Now, this is a nice introduction to process theology, and I wanted to give you that before we move into Sue Hockey's work.